to call tonight's regular council meeting to order. Recommendation that the regular meeting be suspended and the committee of the whole meeting be convened. Moved by I'll move it. Seconded by Can you guys hear me on the phone there?
No, you're cutting out lots there.
Oh, you can hear. Oh, you turn it up. Perfect. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry, the microphone was down there a little bit. Okay, so the recommendation is that the regular meeting be suspended and the committee of the whole meeting be convened. So moved by
I'll move it. I'll move.
Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor 80. Any opposed? Motion's carried. I'd like to call tonight's committee of the whole meeting to order. Recommendation that the agenda for the committee of the whole meeting of May 25th, 2020 be adopted as circulated. Moved by
I'll move it.
Councillor Niche, seconded by
Second. I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any opposed? Motion's carried. I'll direct inquiry to the corporate administrator whether we received any inquiries.
We did. Thank you. All right. We received one email from Larry Golden of 1601 2nd Avenue West, and Mr. Golden's questions are as follows. Have any city staff been laid off as a result of COVID-19? What plans to upgrade city facilities to meet present rules are in place, such as barriers and 6-foot spacings, etc.? And will this require new budgeting, and what money is available now? There were no other queries.
Great. Okay. I think tonight there'll be a report from the city manager on our restart, and those questions I think will be addressed in the report. So I think I'll leave it to the report. And there was no other questions? Okay, so we'll make a note of that, and we'll Mr. Long, we'll have you report out at the end of the regular meeting on some of those questions. Okay, so I'd entertain a motion to adjourn and reconvene the regular council meeting. Moved by
I'll move that.
Moved by Councillor Niche, second by Councillor 80. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, recommendation that the agenda for the regular council meeting of May 25th, 2020 be adopted as revised, amending item 4A to proceed to public notification. Moved by
Councillor Skelton in the move. I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Skelton Morvan and seconded by Councillor 80.
Joining the meeting.
Anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of May 11th, 2020 be adopted. Moved by
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by
I'll move it or second it.
Seconded by Councillor Niche. Any opposed? Motion's carried. Item 4A, report from the city manager regarding a development variance permit for 233 Cormorant Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will be reading this report on behalf of the city manager. On April 27th, an application was received for a development variance permit for the property located at 233 Cormorant Road. The full application was included with the agenda as attachment 1. The location of the subject property is illustrated on the context map, which was included as attachment 2 of the agenda. The application is to vary the City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw, section 5.2.4, backyard setback from the minimum of 3 meters to 2.08 meters. The proposed variance is illustrated in attachment 3 of the agenda. The proposed renovation is primarily for the function of providing a new deck on the back of the premises and should not be intrusive to the immediate neighbors or to the neighborhood in general. There are no costs or budget impact to the city for granting or not granting this variance. And the recommendation before council tonight is that council approves the development variance permit application number DP 2009 for 233 Cormorant Road, to proceed to public notification.
Thank you. Any comments or questions from council?
No, I'd move to, proceed.
Okay, so moved by Councillor Cunningham, second by Councillor Niche. Any further comments? Okay, anyone opposed? Motion's carried. Next, we have a report from our Chief Financial Officer regarding the 2019 audited financial statements.
Thank you. We have provided a report to Council discussing the attached 2019 audited financial statements, which outlines some of the differences compared to the prior year as well as to budget. This year proved a very different audit for staff and our auditors, given the COVID restrictions were in full force at the time. I would like to thank staff for their assistance getting the auditors everything necessary to ensure our auditors could perform their audit from a distance and have our statements ready in time for our annual report next month. Our auditors have indicated they plan on appending an unqualified audit opinion to these statements after Council accepts them. Overall, the city's financial position, as presented by these statements, has continued to improve. This is a welcome change compared to years past. Through the success of Prince Rupert Legacy Inc. and City West, increased tax revenue from new industrial investment and grant support from both senior levels of government, the city has managed to reverse the trend of dwindling cash reserves and minimal capital investment. Unfortunately, two major items offset these positive developments. One, our deferred capital expenditures, and two, the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020. While 2019 was another positive step forward, Prince Rupert, like most places around the world, now faces significant uncertainty regarding economic activity and investment, and consequently, there will undoubtedly be impacts to our revenue streams due to COVID-19. And though it isn't recorded in our financial statements, the lack of reinvestment in our capital infrastructure during our 20-year local recessionary period has put us in a situation where much of it is long overdue for replacement. We are now playing catch-up on all major aspects of our infrastructure. The RCMP building is required by the federal government to be replaced at our cost. The landfill is nearly full, so a new cell is under development. Roads have been patched too many times instead of repaved to provide protection to the substrate. Water main breaks are commonplace and drives our reactive response to underground utility repair. Every resident of Prince Rupert knows of at least an example of parks and recreation infrastructure that is past its service life or could be improved. This deficit in our infrastructure that we cannot record in our financial statements dwarfs the investment in tangible capital assets or accumulated surplus that are recorded in Statement A. However, while that all sounds like bad news, and indeed it is, the difference at the end of 2019 and into 2020 is that we actually have hope of beginning to shrink our infrastructure deficit rather than allowing it to continue to grow. In 2020, the city has held our commitment to increased paving spending, funding the new RCMP building, proceeding with various large water projects, and developing the new landfill cell. If we continue pressing on to renew our city, we may actually dig out of this deficit. That is not something we could have said 10 years ago. We are making progress and will continue forward. These 2019 statements reflect an improved port economy, the fruition of teamwork by staff and officials to advocate for the needs of the community, and that investment into city services and infrastructure pays off. Stay the course. It's clear it's working.
Thank you. And once again, I think we say this more often than not now, but to our staff for doing such an awesome job with our finances, with all the projects that we're managing, for buying into the vision and all of us collectively moving it in one direction together. And I think it's been a tough time through this pandemic, but I know that without your guys' efforts and backbone to keep things moving, this community should be very thankful for your guys' leadership. So just on behalf of council, I just want to thank you guys from the bottom of my heart, because you guys are doing a fantastic job and you deserve all the credit in the world for helping this community move forward. So any comments from council?
So I think staff is doing a great job, as you already said, and looks great.
Thank you. So recommendations that council.
I'll echo that as well. Staff is doing a fantastic job, especially given all the circumstances that we're all
currently in at this time. But yeah, no, just a thank you to everyone for filling additional roles and for a lot of the staff that have picked up additional duties that weren't in their original job description, and just that producing how many masks that they have for the community and things like that.
Any other comments from council?
I'd echo that, and I'd also like to point out that our staff's done a fantastic job of keeping our finances in house and in order, simply because we had 0 tax increases, no layoffs, and no cuts. So I think everyone's quite happy with the way the city's running right now.
Any further comments?
I would add that I'm very happy with the job that's been done. I also will kind of repeat a point I've made in previous meetings, that 6 months down the road, we're not quite sure what we're going to be looking at. But given the quality of the job that the people in charge of this stuff are doing, I think that if the playing field changes 6 months down the road, we're in good hands, and I have a great deal of confidence that we'll manage to make our way through that as well. So I appreciate the job that they're doing.
Councillor Nish, you want to say anything?
I can't really say much more than what's been said already, other than thank you for the good job you've been doing.
Okay, so the recommendations that council by resolution accepts the 2019 audited financial statements. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by
Councillor Skelton Morgan.
Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any further discussion? Okay, anybody opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, next we have a report from the city manager regarding a zoning amendment bylaw number 3453/2020. Mr. Long.
Actually, I will be
okay.
doing this for Mr. Long tonight. On January 2nd, 2020, an application to rezone the referenced property from RM1, which is a multiple family residence, to RM2, single family residence to multiple family residential. The full application was included with the agenda as attachment 1. The subject property is located on the west side of Kootenay Avenue between McCaffrey Place and McKay Street, and is illustrated on the context map that was provided with the agenda as attachment 2. It is proposed that lots 3, 4, and part of 5 be consolidated into one lot. The remainder of lot 5 will continue to be used for social housing by the owner. The property is currently zoned as residential in the official community plan, which is consistent with the proposed rezoning to RM2. This project would replace 28 existing non-market units with new units and add additional units for a total of 65 non-market residential units. This will be an increase of 37 units. While the applicant has submitted a proposed site plan and with building elevations, once the rezoning is granted, the owner would be entitled to change the plans and pursue alternative development concepts permitted currently within the zoning bylaw. In order to ensure development occurs within accordance with the submitted plans, council may require a Section 219 covenant on the property. However, at this time, staff do not recommend that. It is not necessarily required. It is important to note that subsequent to any adoption of this rezoning bylaw, the application would also require a development permit application and subdivision. Additionally, given the property's proximity to the highway, the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure will be required to sign the bylaw prior to adoption. Due to the current COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with Ministerial Order 139, the applicant will prepare a public information package for distribution to the neighborhood with an invitation for comments to be provided to the city's corporate administrator. There are no immediate costs to denying or approving the application as provided. The cost of the development, construction, and servicing of the property will be the responsibility of the applicant. This evening, the recommendation to council is that council give first reading to the proposed zoning amendment bylaw number 3453/2020, and that council instruct the applicant in accordance with Ministerial Order 139 to distribute a public information package and waive the requirement for a public hearing, and that council advise whether a Section 219 covenant will be required should this rezoning bylaw pass.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Long, are you on the phone right now?
That's correct.
Yeah, I think, well, just naturally, the question I think that's going to come up here tonight with council, and just to speak to it, is, we've always obviously done public hearings for rezonings, and I think maybe if you could provide some clarity around how that OCP and why this might fit into this context, just for everyone's understanding on why that may be recommended to waive the public hearing, not just for COVID reasons.
Sure. Basically, we've got two levels of authority. One of this is the OCP, which indicates whether or not the uses are appropriate in certain locations, and if in fact a rezoning comes within something that's already in the OCP as a permitted use, we have the ability to either do this proposal as proposed, which is this notification of the neighborhood and responding, as opposed to a public hearing, which is because of COVID is far more difficult to manage, etc. However, these are choices that the council has. We're making the recommendation that we do the public notification as opposed to the public hearing. But if council is uncomfortable with that, we can go ahead and do the public hearing. I think in that case it would be good to do both, because at least we put some information out in the neighborhood about this particular proposal, and then we could subsequently have a public hearing when we're clear about how it is safely done.
Yeah, and I know there's been an order that's been put out around municipalities conducting public hearings during this time. However, I think at this moment, we technically, council for tonight would only have to pass the first reading and the Order 139 to distribute a public information package, and then at the second reading, we could discuss if we wanted to go with a public hearing, and we could discuss further about the covenant then. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. That's probably a good strategy. And then we've kind of covered off both sides of it. And if there's very little response, or the response is positive or whatever, then council could decide whether they want to do the additional step at second reading.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm saying this is because I think we've been working closely with BC Housing over this last year on a variety of projects, and I do know that, and this isn't, this is public information, is that they've been doing heavy public engagement with that neighborhood over this entire year, because they have extensive plans for that area, and I think this is just the beginning of more projects that they want to do in that area. So I do know that there's been extensive engagement there, and I think council wants to make sure we find that balance on public engagement. So what I would recommend for tonight, for me, would be the recommendation would be that Mayor and Council introduce and give first reading to the zoning amendment bylaw number 3453/2020, and that Council instruct the applicant in accordance with Ministerial Order 139 to distribute a public information package. And that would be the resolution that I would recommend tonight. And then at the second reading, after we get that information back, we could discuss further about how we want to proceed, if council's in agreement with that.
I would second that.
Okay, so I'll move that, and seconded by Councillor Nation. I'll just quickly, just a quick point here to the corporate administrator. Is there anything else about that resolution that I need to add to that? Is that correct wording? Okay.
That is
So
correct.
discussion from council then about the project.
Okay.
Lee, one thing.
Oh, Councillor 80, then Councillor Cunningham.
Okay, go ahead.
It does make a note that we're going to replace 28 units, which, is probably a good thing, because we're going to make more units. I think it falls firmly in line with a general community objective to create more housing. So I'm basically in support of it. I'm just wondering what happens with the residents of the 28 units in the meantime.
So I believe that what will happen is the BC Housing will be giving a public information package out, and then they're going to have to report out that plan to the community on what that, and then when we come to second reading, we're going to learn more information. So traditionally, whenever we do rezonings, there's normally there would be a public information session, like an in-person session, but because of the changes of COVID, that's why Ministerial Order number 139 is in place for the information package. We will get that report back. We will also hear back around issues around traffic and things like that. And then once we get that information, then we will ask more questions at the second reading. So we'll have more information when this comes back to council after they're able to get some information out to the community. Does that make sense to you, Councillor Eady?
Yeah. My other question was when we talk about public notification to the neighborhood, what exactly are we defining as the neighborhood?
I believe it's 100. Is it 100 yards or 100? It's a radius, correct?
It's generally a radius of 50 meters around the property that would be affected.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a 50-meter radius around the property affected. But usually, particular projects like this, like with BC Housing, they will probably do much more than just a 50-meter radius. They'll probably engage most of the neighborhood, which I know they've already been doing. But that's up to the proponent to engage with, but the bylaws state what the radius is in terms of their mandatory engagement.
Okay, thanks.
I got one thing, Lee.
Oh, it was Councillor Cunningham and then Councillor Niche.
Yeah.
Okay, public notification. I'd like to make sure that they do a very good job of this, including advertising in the local paper.
Yeah, there's
And,
legal
also-
requirements, Councillor Cunningham, for them to follow. So this all falls under a rezoning requirement. So they have legal requirements. There has to be certain time frames, like 2-week notices and things like that, have to be given. So all of that has to be followed. And I think we also can recognize that in terms of proponents, this is more of a low-risk proponent because it is the provincial government that is proposing the project.
Yeah, but we got to take into consideration the people who live in this neighborhood. If they've got some input, whether the project should be this or that, or they're the ones directly affected. And 100 meters or 100 yards doesn't cut the mustard in that area because you've got cul-de-sacs that all empty down onto Kootenay and places like that. And I think it should only be fair to the residents of that area to have any input, whether it's 100 feet, 100 yards, or 100 meters, or another 50 meters up a cul-de-sac. I just think that Kootenay there in that one area is a very large residential area on one side, and now we need the housing, and I support it 100%. But I really want to hear from the residents in that area if they have any concerns, or if like we have discussed the layout and things like that, and I'm quite sure the people in the neighborhood are going to be concerned whether they want that apartment block in the front or the back or things like this. I've heard different opinions.
Yeah, so I can clarify that then. So because of Ministerial Order 139, they have to distribute a public information package. That's under the order. Traditionally, there would be a public information session that would be like an open house type of thing that anyone could attend and ask questions from the proponent. Usually, we would have city staff on hand to answer questions as well. In this context, we can't congregate people, so that information has to be distributed. So in this circumstance, BC Housing has to distribute that information. And I think we can make a note that we'd like, because of the density of that neighborhood, that they could maybe expand it further than just what the minimum requirements are. So I would agree with that. However, this is where council makes the decision. Yeah. This is where council makes the decision about, at the next reading, if we want to have a public hearing, even though this could technically fit within the OCP guidelines right now and might necessarily need a public hearing, that if we do opt for that, then that gives the entire community a chance to have a say. And I think that's something that sounds like we would like to go in that direction anyways, because technically we've never not had a public hearing on a rezoning anyways. But that would be at second reading. And then that gives the community an ability to have a say. And I think at this point, given what I've understood around the new orders around public hearings, is that there would be some sort of digital element to having that public hearing. So in this particular concept, this is our first reading, so it's our first glance at it. Usually we say, okay, go back out to the community, let's get some feedback. And then on second reading, we're going to have a variety of new information presented to us, and then we'll decide how to proceed from there. But I do agree that people should have a say, not just in the immediate area, in the entire residence there. And I think to echo Councillor 80's remarks that this is good news to have more housing expanded, and making sure that everybody has a say on it, I think, is what matters on our end. So just so we know what the motion is on the floor right now is just to distribute information, collect information, get some engagement from the residents. However, I do know that they already have done extensive engagement there, and we could even ask them to provide us feedback on what those engagements have turned up as well. So they're going to be required to do all those things. So that's part of the process for sure. Councillor Niche.
I was just going to add that if they want to hand out packages to people in the neighborhood, I would like to see that maybe expanded a little bit further than the normal, and also if there's a way that they could do it online so that people that aren't in the neighborhood, people that would maybe turn up to a public hearing, have the ability to look at the information also. Or request a package also. So when they're putting the ad in the paper, basically state that anybody can request that information, not just people in the neighborhood, as far as the packages are concerned. Because I do feel that the ability not to have a public hearing, there may be other people in the community that would like to speak to it and would like to have that information.
Absolutely. I think we'll make a note of that, and I see the corporate administrator nodding her head, so I think we can talk about an online piece here as well as a further expansion of information. What comes to mind to me right now is maybe like a little webinar or something that usually you do a presentation at these public information sessions. So we'll work with BC Housing on that, because it is a unique, I've heard from many municipalities, development process right now is it's a strange animal because of the fact that you can't bring a bunch of people together to engage. So we'll work through that, and we'll have that information distributed out once we know more. Does that sound good? Okay. Those are good comments. So, other comments from council?
I'll move the motion.
Well, the motion's on the floor. So once again, the motion is that Mayor and Council introduce and give first reading to the zoning amendment bylaw number 3453/2020, and that Council instruct the applicant in accordance with Ministerial Order 139 to distribute a public information package. That's the resolution on the floor right now. And with the side note that we're going to ask them to expand to further residents their information package, and to potentially even do some sort of online engagement as well.
Can I just ask then that the third point there, that we advise on a Section 219 covenant, are we not going to advise on that? Are we going to wait until the second reading to do that?
Yeah, I think we need to figure out more information. That's why I said the motion the way I did, because I don't think we need to we don't need to determine anything yet about the public hearing, and we don't need to determine anything yet about the Section 219 until we're able to get the various ministries involved and get some information from BC Housing and get some feedback back from the residents, and then second reading we'll have more information to be able to move forward from there.
Okay, so then I would just request that when the second reading comes back around, we make sure that the question about a Section 219 covenant is highlighted and then resolved at that point.
Absolutely. Any further discussion? Okay.
The only thing is, and I agree with Councillor Neese, and I already said it, I'd like to extend the boundaries for public notification as wide as we can, whether it's on one side of Smithers or the other, as you're going to be increasing volume of traffic and things like that, and even with the Department of Highways, they're going to be concerned about Park and coming on from Smithers and that. So I think we have to expand this to the whole neighborhood. And I like the idea of there's a lot of people that sometimes have something to say that don't necessarily live right there. So I think it's important we engage the public as much as possible on this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Is anyone opposed to the resolution? Okay, so the motion's carried. So we will begin that process, and we'll know more within the next few weeks. Okay, moving on. I was hoping that perhaps, Mr. Long, you could do a quick city update on our Phase 2 plans. I know that the city is starting the process of slowly and cautiously getting some services going again, and maybe I thought it would be good to have an update from you to the community about that. And also to address some of the measures that we've put in place that was asked earlier.
Yeah, I can do that. We intend to open the doors on Wednesday to one person at a time, sort of appointment-only service. So we just don't have the facility to do any more than that. So we'll move ahead again cautiously, making sure that the staff are safe and the people that are coming in are safe. We continue to work on some of the other issues with provincial agencies around how and when we should open, for example, some of our recreation facilities. And other than that, I didn't catch all of the questions that Mr. Goling had to say, but one of them was, has anyone been laid off? I think the answer is no. No one has been officially laid off. A number of people have gone home for health issues and a number of other issues related to COVID. But where there was where we could reorganize work, we've done it. For example, in the recreation department, as everyone knows, they've been building masks and then picking up litter, et cetera, to keep themselves busy doing things in the public interest. So that was fine, but I didn't catch the other questions. I'm sorry.
It was just mainly what kind of preventative measures have we been putting in place, and I think we things like barriers and that type of thing, and I think.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, no, the plastic barriers, the plexiglass barriers have been up where we'll start to react, or where we'll be forward-facing to the public. And so all those measures have now been pretty well in place. So we'll start slowly with appointment only. All of the distancing measures, et cetera, in accordance with all the requirements of new provincial safety protocols are being adhered to within the rest of the staff, and the staff continue to do the regular work of the city, which these days seems to be, repairing water breaks and those kinds of things. So, and we're following the rules, and I think it's being fairly successful. So, slowly we'll get back to what was, or what it will likely be, a new normal, but slowly we'll get back to regular service as we can.
Great, thank you for that. So would it be expected then that maybe the first couple weeks of June we might see some movement then on the city's end on certain services, just taking it 1 week at a time type of thing? Like, for example, tennis courts and things like that?
Yeah, for example, we hope to open the tennis courts on June the 1st.
Right. Okay.
We'll be prepping this week, but we won't be, and we're mowing the grass on some of the sort of collectively used kind of green space, but not the tot lots, et cetera, because we're not in a position to do that safely yet, and the regulations in terms of the provincial government don't allow us to do those things. So yeah, it's just slow but sure and steady opening of the community in a way that continues to be safe for everyone.
Great, thank you. Okay, now I'll open it to any reports from council.
Okay, I have a couple of questions,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. There's been a story in the paper about wolves and people's pets being taken and what have you, and I understand that there's this kind of debate that goes on in people's homes about, live and let live, and we live in nature, and it's all part of the natural environment versus, we should put up firewalls and deal with it and respond. I don't wish to weigh into that debate. My question is more about where the city's jurisdictional limits are in terms of working with that kind of an issue around wildlife and wildlife incursions between the conservation officers and so on. I mean, what is it that we actually have any control over there?
Do you want to answer, Rosa?
I'll attempt to answer that. We have really no control over those issues. We have some control, obviously, over domestic pets, but we don't have any control over wildlife. That's a provincial issue under the Wildlife Act. We usually, from a practical point of view, if a wolf does show up, and I think all of us have experienced a wolf at some point, a quick phone call to the Conservation Service. They usually respond from terrace, and that is the most effective way for us to manage any of that difficulty.
So I guess my follow-up is to echo what I know that loads of people around here would love to see, and that is, where are we with regard to persuading the province to provide us with a conservation officer located here?
Well, that's something that I think we've written numbers of letters over the years to request, but at the moment, at least not as I understand it, I think we're still responding from terrace. I don't know if anybody else has more updated information, but that's where it sits.
I'd like to add into this conversation.
Go ahead.
So I was actually going to see if we could actually put in a request, send a letter about requesting a conservation officer, be located in this town, because I do feel that, this is something that comes up every year. It seems like every year we all forget about it, and everyone seems to talk about it like it's something new. But this every year the wolves come to town. Every year the wolves take people's animals. Some years may be worse than others, but I do feel that it is a problem that is here every year, and I do feel that they should be able to provide a conservation officer. As a Rupert taxpayer, we pay for the RCMP, and I don't feel that it's right for the RCMP to have to be responding to these calls all the time. I mean, they've got way better things to be dealing with than chasing wolves around with, as best as job they can do. They're not trained and they're not equipped with the right equipment to do this job, and it's the Conservation Service that should be doing it, and we should be putting in a request for this because and do it numerous times. If we need to write them numerous letters, I think it's time for it to happen, because this does happen every year, and now is the time.
Okay, on that note, we could put a notice of motion together to get a letter written to the provincial government to make that request for the next council meeting. And in the meantime, we can still reach out to them tomorrow and start the process of letting them know what we feel. I know we have had many engagements in the past. I know a couple of years ago we did the same thing. So, and then we'll reach out to the MLA's office as well and see if we can figure out a process for that, for sure.
I would support that. So.
I'm not sure. We don't need a resolution.
I
for
would
those
too.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I don't think we don't need a resolution for a notice of motion, but we'll just put that for the next meeting to discuss further then. That way it doesn't drop off of the radar as well. Did you have anything other? You said you had
Sounds good.
another one, Councillor Adie?
Yeah, I just want to add that I think that the sort of COVID-19 situation that we're in requires that the city continue to do what it can to express the recommended practices for people. And I don't want to identify areas where that's falling down or not falling down. I just think that we should make a sort of an ongoing effort to continue sending those messages on what the recommendations are, supporting what the provincial health officer is saying, and I would like to see that be a sort of a more prominent part of what we're doing.
Like through communications, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's something easily done for sure. Okay, other reports.
Okay, surprise, surprise, it's Barry here. Now with some of our businesses that are opening up, I really like to see the city emphasize shop locally. These businesses have been so generous over the years to us with different sponsorship or raffles and that, and I think it's time that we turned around and supported them. And not just the residents of this town, but the city itself should be looking inward and supporting any businesses they can, rather than having businesses come from Terrace to deliver stuff to us and that. And I think the city itself should be looking at supporting local businesses as well as the residents getting out and supporting as many local businesses as they can. I think it's very important. Our businesses need our help right now, and I think that's something we should be looking at.
Thanks for that, Councillor Cunningham. The city, we have a few things underway on that front. 1 second, Councillor Cunningham. Is that we have the Small Business Task Force put together with the tourism and the chamber. There's been a variety of recommendations coming from that. We also, through the Active Office with the Love Prince Rupert campaign, there's a huge marketing campaign going on right now for Shop Local. We've also partnered with the Community Futures Pacific Northwest, and we have a hotline now established between the two of us to help local businesses, which has been receiving 12 to 20 calls a day right now for assistance. So that's something that the city's involved with. And the city's also, at all times, is always looking for local procurement opportunity. But in this period of time, all of the staff in the departments have looked even further on how they can go out of our way to be supporting local businesses, and have reached out to numerous businesses on some of our operations on that. So that's definitely part of that discussion, and it's a valid point too.
Okay, and on the subject of the wolves and that, we as residents can help too by making sure that our garbage cans are taken care of, there's no litter. If you're throwing apples and bread out for the deer, you're also attracting the wolves. So, it's something that we as residents can help clean up the town a little bit, and at the same time take any attraction that would bring the wolves into town away.
Thank you. Any further reports from council? Okay, to entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make motion.
Okay, moved by Councillor Renhowa, seconded by Councillor Niche. Okay, any opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Have a great evening.